Hi, it's so nice to be back. I want to welcome everyone to the first event of our fall term schedule. We've got lots of great events planned for you. Mostly they'll be happening on Wednesdays at 5, but there are a couple of exceptions to that. So if you want to make sure you're in the loop with everything that's happening at the Rockefeller Center, please email us and we'll make sure that you get added to our email newsletter. I especially want to welcome any first-year Dartmouth students who are in the audience. I hope this is the first of many Rockefeller Center events that you will be attending. I'm Joanne Blay. I'm the program officer for public events at the Rockefeller Center. I would also like to welcome back our friends and neighbors from the Upper Valley. Our programming over the summer was mostly geared to students, so we didn't get to see a lot of you over the summer, but we hope that you're happy to be back. I just have a quick housekeeping thing to mention. If you want to ask questions, and you're welcome to ask questions at any time during this talk, you can either click on the Q&A button or the chat button. And Shadi Mirvazan, who's one of our student assistants, will relay your questions. There's Shadi. She'll relay your questions to Professor Barabas during the Q&A portion of our event. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Andrew Samwick. Andrew is the Sandra L. and Arthur L. Irving Professor of Economics, but for today's purposes, we're more proud of his other title. He used to be the director of the Rockefeller Center. It's my great pleasure to introduce Andrew, who will then introduce our current director. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Samwick, and I'm a professor of economics here at Dartmouth. Now in my 27th year on the faculty, I would like to extend a special welcome to the Dartmouth class of 2024, most of whom have joined us here in Hanover to begin their college years. I hope that you make the Rockefeller Center one of your academic homes on campus over the next 4 years. Today, I find myself in a place that is at once familiar and perhaps twice unfamiliar. Familiar in that I am pleased to be kicking off a term of public programs at the Rockefeller Center. For more than 35 years, the center has served the Dartmouth community as a catalyst for teaching, research, and deliberation about public policy and the social sciences. Public programs are an important mechanism to fulfill the elements of the center's mission to foster campus dialogue about policy issues and to promote understanding of policy issues in the community beyond Dartmouth. And yet, today is also unfamiliar, trivially because I am now the former director of the center, and very consequentially because we are living through a pandemic, the containment of which requires measures that wreak havoc on our usual way of educating, training, and inspiring the next generation of public policy leaders. Normally, we would be gathered in the basement of the Rockefeller Center, and I would be speaking to you from the podium. Instead, I am 3 flights up in my office, coming to you via Zoom, and you can be scattered around the campus, the country, even the globe. I anticipate teaching my courses in the winter and spring under the same circumstances. Lest we give in to the temptation to focus on what is lost, I saw a hashtag today in a tweet by the principal of our local elementary school. Hashtag creativity over COVID. Creativity is indeed one of the pathways out of our current predicament, along with intelligence, empathy, and a sense of civic pride. Even more plainly, this is just a battle to see whether we as a society have more resilience than does this virus. Much of that resilience, if it is to appear, will necessarily come through public policy. We are confronting challenges on a wide range of issues, from this global health pandemic and the economic crisis it created, to police brutality and continued calls for racial justice. What is at stake today in our nation's public policy, both the consequences of poorly designed and implemented policies, as well as the opportunities for well-crafted and executed policies, could hardly be higher. As in the 15 years I served as the center's director, it is an honor to introduce a speaker to the Dartmouth community who has unique experiences and deep insights to inform our understanding of public policy, leadership, and the ways that the Rockefeller Center might cultivate both. Jason Barabas began his tenure as the director of the Rockefeller Center and as a professor in the government department in July of this year, after 7 years in the Department of Political Science at Stony Brook University. At Stony Brook, he directed the master's program in public policy. Prior to arriving at Stony Brook, he held postdoctoral fellowships at Harvard and Princeton, as well as faculty positions at Florida State University and Southern Illinois University. He earned his PhD in political science from Northwestern University. Professor Barabas formed his connection with Dartmouth as a student in the class of 1993. During his time as an undergraduate here, he was a government major, whose honors thesis was awarded the Pressman Prize in the field of American government and politics. He also participated in programs offered by the Rockefeller Center, then less than a decade old. One example was an internship where he was funded to go to Washington, D.C. during the spring of 1992 to work as an intern in the White House Office of Media Affairs during the first Bush administration. After graduating from Dartmouth, he was appointed as an economic policy advisor for the governor of Illinois. Currently, Professor Barabas teaches and conducts research on public policy and opinion preferences, often with an emphasis on empirical methodology and research design. A central question guiding his research is whether citizens get what they want from government. In particular, does policy reflect the will of the people? Dr. Barabas has published more than a dozen articles in top-ranked journals, such as American Political Science Review, American Journal of Political Science, and Journal of Politics. Additionally, he has received awards from the American Political Science Association and the International Society for Political Psychology. Today, he will speak to us about his newest and most important professional ambition, Rocky in the 2020s, the past, present, and future of the Nelson A. Rockefeller Center for Public Policy and the Social Sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Jason Barabas.
Andrew, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I truly appreciate it. You know and really helped build the Rockefeller Center to what it is today. And I'm going to be talking and introducing the Rockefeller Center, reintroducing the Rockefeller Center to people who know it, who love it, who value it. But thanks again for your input over the years, also your advice over the last few months as I'm getting started here in my directorship. I'm in the few months that I've been the director of the Rockefeller Center, I've had people give me a lot of advice saying, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I find myself thinking to myself, we are doing this, or we do have programs that are addressing what you're talking about. So it is such a dynamic organization. It is, I hope, going to be a positive force in the lives of many undergraduate students and also members of the community in the world beyond Dartmouth, beyond Hanover. I am talking to you just a few floors below from where Andrew's sitting. So I'm in the Rockefeller Center myself. It's a bit lonely here. I'll show you some pictures toward the end of my presentation, just to give people a sense of what the building looks like, and hopefully it will be filled once again with students. But in the meantime, we're going to do the best we can with the campus restrictions, with COVID restrictions, and I hope this presentation allows us to showcase everything that Rockefeller Center is doing and ways that, particularly the class of 24, but also current Dartmouth classes and even people who've been through Dartmouth in years past can all take a part in this. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, start a presentation. We will conclude with some questions and answers period at the end of the talk. So with that, I'm going to start sharing the screen. Bear with me here. And hopefully that should be, everyone should be able to see the title slide here. So I'll just get going. Andrew is the longest serving director of the Rockefeller Center, more than 15 years. You see here on our website at the URL listed below, many other people who have directed the Rockefeller Center. I've had conversations with some of them, And I, again, truly value their input over the years in crafting the Rockefeller Center to make it what it is today. Russ Muir was also, he's my colleague in the government department. He's the chair of the government department. He stepped in as interim director in late 2019 and 2020. And again, he's also provided a lot of valuable insight and advice as I get going. The Rockefeller Center itself is quite diverse. On our webpage here, and whenever I can, I'm going to have the URLs that you can browse to and follow up with on your own or follow along with. There are many different aspects that we divide the Rockefeller Center on: public policy, leadership, funding. I will go into each of these areas. So I'm going to start first with the About the Center tab and really just trying to give you a sense of what the Rockefeller Center is. What does Rocky do, but really concentrating on the who of that. Then we'll get into the when and the how and perhaps the why as well. So the Rockefeller Center, as we've been discussing, is named after Nelson A. Rockefeller, a 1930s graduate of Dartmouth. I will have a lot more to say about him and his life and his legacy and his leadership style and public policy credentials. We are housed in this building that you see here in the middle screen. It was dedicated in 1983 after Nelson Rockefeller's death. And this is something that the motto you see here of education, research, public policy, and civic leadership, those are all important facets and themes in the Rockefeller Center. Two of our senior leaders in the Rockefeller Center, Sadhna Hall and Ron Scheiko. Andrew credits his success as hiring both of these individuals, bringing them into the Rockefeller Center, and I couldn't agree more. They are instrumental to everything you see in the success that the Rockefeller Center has. I have communications with both of them regularly. Sadhna Hall concentrates really on all facets of the Rockefeller Center, but particularly the co-curricular side, our leadership, education programs. Ron Scheiko is the deputy director for the curricular side and also the research programs as well. But we jointly meet weekly, if not more regularly than that, and exchange many emails. And again, the Rockefeller Center is really largely a reflection of the efforts that these individuals have put in for more than a decade. And so this was, again, Andrew's legacy to me, and I certainly value it. The Rockefeller Center also has a number of dedicated faculty and staff members. You see here before you. I don't have time to go into each of their stories, but you can follow along their profiles as you see here. Again, talented group of individuals who give so much to the Rockefeller Center, and I'm truly thankful for their efforts as well. The Rockefeller Center as well has a board of visitors. So these are Dartmouth graduates from many different eras and cohorts. I've met with the Board of Visitors already in a virtual meeting in July, especially to discuss all of the dramatic events unfolding around the United States with racial justice, with George Floyd's situation. We talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we also have additional meetings planned on those topics, as well as a board meeting coming up in November. Typically those board meetings are in person, but this time it's going to have to be virtual. So I look forward to meeting a lot of these individuals in person. I've shown here Timothy Harrison, the chair of the Board of Visitors. He and I have had a number of wonderful discussions over the last few weeks and months, and I really look forward to continuing to work with him and the rest of the Board of Visitors as well. I should also thank and acknowledge the generous donations of many different people who have helped make the Rockefeller Center is what it is today. So there's a plaque that you see in the middle it has the names of nearly 100 people that have donated to actually create the Rockefeller Center, but you also see an incomplete list. It's impossible to do justice to all the people who donate and all the classes that have donated to the Rockefeller Center. But you see here Glenda and Fritz Corrigan, class of 1964, really instrumental in helping to create our leadership training program. So I'll mention those a bit later. There are also many named class funds, and you're going to see again some of our programming in these areas that are related to particular classes. There's a picture down at the bottom of Senator Rob Portman from Ohio. Again, the Portman family has endowed a speakership, and we are thankful for that as well. One other set of people I want to introduce you to are the people who are running this part of Dartmouth College where the Rockefeller Center sits. So I have here a picture of Elizabeth Smith, the Dean of Arts and Sciences. And she was the person who called me in May, I believe, to tell me I got the job, and it was a dream come true. I remember that phone call very well, one of the best days of my life. Working with Elizabeth is John Carey, one of my colleagues from the government department. He's the Associate Dean for Social Sciences. I think it's helpful to remember where the Rockefeller Center sits in the organizational chart of Dartmouth. So our name has the word social sciences in it, in the title of the Rockefeller Center. These are the departments that fall within that at Dartmouth, and we have many students from these departments taking advantage of our programming. We go well beyond those departments though, and I'm going to show you a bit of that in just a little bit. Elizabeth Smith, in her message and her orientation session for new faculty that I attended recently, put up the Dartmouth College mission statement. And I think it's important because it's important to think about how closely Dartmouth's overall mission mirrors that of the Rockefeller Center or vice versa. So Dartmouth College is tasked with educating very promising students and preparing them for a lifetime of learning. These are themes that you heard Andrew mention. Also this responsible leadership theme. And of course, we have faculty dedicated to teaching and the creation of knowledge, this dual mission. The Rockefeller Center itself is really tasked with doing all of that. We're seen as a catalyst for teaching, research, and deliberation about public policy throughout the social sciences. We provide that interdisciplinary perspective on policy-related topics, and we have this commitment to foster public service and inform public debate, which is exemplified by the man for which the center is named. And I'm going to say a lot more about Nelson Rockefeller in just a moment. But in particular, there are six key areas to develop the potential for leadership among undergraduate students, to support high quality research on policy related topics. You're going to see evidence of all of these in just a few minutes. Encouraging experiential learning in the policy realm. Again, we do that through so many of our programs. Foster campus dialogue about public policy issues. So again, you're going to see examples of how we've been doing that in 2020, but also events that are upcoming as well. We do have this cross-disciplinary approach to solving policy problems. That's going to be a feature of Nelson Rockefeller and his leadership style. And finally, to promote another charge is to promote the public understanding of issues, policy issues beyond the Dartmouth community. So again, events like this public outreach are one piece of that at the Rockefeller Center. Now, again, I mentioned the center is named for Nelson Rockefeller. It's worth talking a little bit about Nelson Rockefeller himself, 1930s graduate of Dartmouth College. For the 25th anniversary of the Rockefeller Center, something that Andrew presided over in 2008, there was a talk by Richard Norton Smith that you can find on YouTube. I encourage people to download it and view it when they have more time. Norton Smith's book on Rockefeller, I'm about 30 pages away from finishing this book that's over 700 pages, really a tour de force on Nelson Rockefeller's life, and really exemplifies many of the ideals, many of the programs we have today. I see legacies of Nelson Rockefeller, so I want to say a few more words about him in that respect. There are many photos in the book, so I put up a few of them. Rockefeller interacting with John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon, Lyndon B. Johnson, and also campaigning for president several times. He was a player on the national stage and also a 4-term governor of the state of New York from 1959 to 1973. He, among other policy highlights and credentials and achievements, he expanded the SUNY higher education system. So my previous position that Andrew mentioned was at Stony Brook University on Long Island in New York. That is part of the SUNY education system. It's one of the flagship schools in that system of more than 64 campuses. When Nelson Rockefeller first arrived, there were about fewer than 40,000 students. Now it's over 400,000. He saw a big chunk of that increase through his efforts over the years. Not just a one-issue person, though, very involved with creating opportunities for clean water and clean air, the Pure Waters Act, looking at support for the arts. He had been the MoMA president prior to being the governor of New York, very involved with racially integrated housing, transportation. I saw that on Long Island with the Long Island Railroad system, prison and criminal justice. This, we still sort of talk about whether or not those mandatory minimum sentences make sense, but still very much an activist governor in many different respects. He ultimately became the vice president for Republican Gerald Ford in the 1970s. I should note also that Richard Norton Smith's book talks about Hubert Humphrey in 1968 as a Democrat approaching him to possibly be on the ticket. So you can see his crossover potential and his appeal to many different sides of the political spectrum. In this book by Norton Smith, there's a quote from a legendary New York Times reporter describing Nelson Rockefeller as somebody who loved task forces, loved to immerse himself into policy positions and minutia. Andrew left for me several books that all bear testament to this as well. There are pictures here that you see here, him with Gerald Ford and also Henry Kissinger. Nelson Rockefeller was deeply involved in foreign policy issues, especially in Latin America. So very interested in that as well. Nelson Rockefeller's legacy was so important that I asked Laura Howard at the Rockefeller Center to produce a video, a short little video biography. And so I'm going to take just a few minutes to have Laura cue that video up and show it to you because it's brand new on the Rockefeller Center website today, just reiterating some of these things. If you could do that, Laura, that would be great.
Born in Maine in 1908, Nelson A. Rockefeller was the grandson of John D. Rockefeller, the founder of the Standard Oil Company, which grew to be one of the largest companies in America. Nelson Rockefeller graduated from Dartmouth College in the 1930s and went on to work in the Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, and Dwight D. Eisenhower presidential administrations before his election in 1958 as the governor of New York. Ultimately, Nelson Rockefeller went on to serve 4 terms as New York's governor, and he became the Vice President of the United States in 1974. Nelson Rockefeller had a lifelong fascination with public policy. Over the course of nearly 50 years, he made significant contributions in fields as diverse as education, international relations, conservation, housing, public health, architecture, and agricultural development. Rockefeller once said, "Nothing delights me as much as facing up to a complex public issue with all of its confusion, turmoil, and intensity, and trying to pull together the human resources to deal with it. I like the challenge and excitement of trying to develop concepts within which new and complex issues can be interrelated and reconciled, and solutions can be found." Rockefeller's leadership style made use of teams of experts debating the merits of different policy options. Likewise, throughout his life, Rockefeller employed an interdisciplinary approach to problem solving spanning different philosophies and ideologies. To him, all issues were interconnected. Rockefeller's strengths included seemingly boundless energy, optimism, charm, and a forceful personality. It was said that one of his greatest talents was his ability to study a problem, seize upon a workable solution, and harness the talents of a diverse group of individuals to turn the idea into a working program. Beyond his career as a public servant, Nelson Rockefeller was also a passionate supporter of the arts, along with other members of his family. His mother, Abby Aldrich Rockefeller, spearheaded the creation of the Modern Museum of Art in New York, and Nelson served as its president. After Nelson Rockefeller passed away in the 1970s, his son Rodman Rockefeller, who was a 1954 graduate of Dartmouth, helped create the Nelson A. Rockefeller Center for Public Policy and the Social Sciences. Rocky, as it is known to students at Dartmouth College, seeks to educate, train, and inspire students through public policy courses, leadership training, and informing the public through events and policy research.
Thank you, Laura, for putting that together. Again, it is truly an honor to lead this center that is named in honor of Nelson Rockefeller. There are many problems that we face today that I would think would benefit from leaders that can find the middle. Rockefeller, in particular, was known, created a version of politics known as Rockefeller Republicans. So this is mentioned in Norton Smith's book as well. He was described as being too liberal for the Republicans and too conservative for Democrats. You see articles here. I found one from 2016 talking about how scarce Rockefeller Republicans are in various states. We see many instances of partisanship, polarization in the United States, people not being able to pass coronavirus funding right now as we speak. So again, I'm trying to just think about the current political context in light of the style of governing and partisanship and politics that Nelson Rockefeller exhibited. He was very progressive in terms of civil rights, actually helping perhaps bankroll several of Dr. Martin Luther King's racial protests throughout the South in the 60s. He was attacked. He attacked John Kennedy in 1960 for being too conservative on racial issues. So he was attacking Kennedy from the left. So really just kind of an interesting political dynasty and something that is an endangered species, perhaps something we can learn from. Interestingly enough, Stephen Colbert, the comedian, just likened Biden and Harris to Rockefeller Republicans because from his perspective, he views them as more moderate than other politicians in the Democratic Party, perhaps trying to occupy that middle space. So I think all of this is worthy of more academic insight, research, and whatnot to try to look to see what the Rockefeller Republican legacy is and what it might be in the future too, as both the parties continue to reinvent themselves. So with the who fairly well established here, let's concentrate on some of the issues and topical domains that the Rockefeller Center is known for, starting with public policy. So we have an annual report that's put out each year, and I'm going to give you a few highlights from the annual report. So here is one of the screens that we talk about how nearly 400 students in the 1920 academic year were enrolled in our public policy courses, and there's 15 of those courses. Ultimately, there were 17 different majors in that time period. But that's an impressive number, especially with a college that's the size of Dartmouth. It's a really small college. So we're touching a good chunk of the Dartmouth undergraduates through courses. I'll show you in a few moments the leadership programs, which bring that number up to close to 1,000. So almost a fourth of the class getting Rockefeller Center programming in one form or another. I also have a picture here of some of the faculty research grants that we have. So here's a photo of Senator, former New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte, and this is in Lisa Valdez's gender and war class, I believe. But this is, we do a lot of other faculty enhancement grants like this, where we help them bring in speakers that are relevant for the course material that our students are learning each day. Those majors are not just in the social sciences, as I mentioned before. So we do, of course, have a lot of people who are interested in history, government, or economics, but we also serve a wide swath of the Dartmouth community. So here is something that Ron Scheiko and Laura Mitchell helped put together, and I had a Dartmouth undergraduate, Margaret Hubble, help me visualize this and to show you all of the different majors that are people who are in biology or economics or chemistry, but who are also then taking a public policy minor. So you can see that we are cutting across the Dartmouth campus, not just in the social sciences, but well beyond into biology, chemistry, engineering, theater, English, and we could do this with our other individual courses as well. But the point here, and the point that Ron is importantly reminds us of, is what a bridging organization Dartmouth is, and how it bridges many people from different areas that might not be talking together. So it provides a lot of academic diversity within the college. In terms of public policy, one of the other things we're really known for is the Class of 1964 Policy Research Shop. So this is sponsored by the Class of 1964. This is an opportunity for students to go into the state legislatures in Vermont and New Hampshire. Those legislatures are, relatively speaking, in the United States, small and understaffed. So this is an opportunity for Dartmouth students to get involved in cutting edge policy topics and have a voice in those. So they do the research, perhaps figuring out what other states are doing, and then they testify before the legislators in these states. So we have over 50 of these reports in the current academic year, actually 2019 to 2020. This next slide here shows just a smattering of those that we just put up in 2020. So these are policy briefs that you can find the URLs in terms of the topics. Homelessness in the Upper Valley was something we just put up as a policy brief in 2020. Also other titles that I've shortened here to fit them all on the screen. You see many different topics. In blue, you can see the range of different issues. So food security, juvenile justice system, wind farms in Vermont, the 5G rollout. You also see in purple our global public health policy lab. So that takes place providing policy insight in Kosovo or in Peru. So it's not even just in the Upper Valley or in the New England states. We do have a wider reach into around the world, in different parts of the world as well. Leadership. So just like with the public policy offerings, this is our co-curricular side, if you hear us using that language. There are many different leadership programs. By the way, very few of these existed before Andrew, Sadna, and Ron joined the Rockefeller Center. So they were in large part responsible for helping build up and create these wonderful programs. I don't have time to go into each of them, but I'll just say a few words about them. It's also by their acronyms. So that's one of the things you have to learn about Rocky is people will put these acronyms out at you. So DLAB for the Leadership, Attitudes, and Behavior Program, the Global Leadership Program, RGLP, the Management Leadership and Development Program, or the Rocky Leadership Fellows. So these are all geared at different points of the Dartmouth career. I'll have a slide at the end that kind of showcases where these programs sit in the career trajectory of any Dartmouth student. We actually had an open house for the 24s, and more than 100 people came in virtually to hear about these programs, DLAB and others that they might take part in, even in this first year. All together in 19 and 20, there were almost 400, so 360 people who took part in these programs. These programs are also served to bridge Dartmouth cohorts or Dartmouth classes in the sense that older students are a lot of times mentoring younger students. So it's one of the other models here. And over here on the right, the Rocky Leadership Fellows is highly competitive. Again, we're attempting to experiment with different formats as the pandemic goes forward. A lot of the programming has been moved online, but Sadna and other staffers associated with these programs are continuing to innovate each day, and we're getting good reports on that so far. In terms of funding, the Rockefeller Center is active in terms of supporting students who are taking internships. Many of the Washington internships are shown here, and you can recognize a lot of those buildings. 67 students were funded in the 1920 year. You can see some of the recent interns in various parts of the country. And even around the world in some cases. The photo in the middle is with class of 88, Kirsten Gillibrand, my former senator from the state of New York, also hosting some of our students as well. This part on internship funding, as Andrew mentioned before, was very personal to me. So in the early 1990s, I received some funding from Rocky to do a White House internship in the Office of Media Affairs. That ultimately set the stage for my honors thesis in the government department that was discussing presidential media strategies. Do they frame issues one way or another? That was a tremendously, life-changing experience. There's a picture of me with my thesis advisor, Dennis Sullivan, in the Department of Government it was something that ultimately I worked for a few years in the state of Illinois doing economic policy for the governor of Illinois, but it was such a great experience to work on that honors thesis with Dennis Sullivan that I ultimately left the state of Illinois employment and went to graduate school in just north of Chicago and Northwestern University. That in turn, as Andrew also mentioned, set the stage then for many different academic stops along the way, postdocs and faculty positions, before ultimately being able to return to Dartmouth to direct his public policy program. So it was a long arc. I see Rocky as having started that, and I also really value that and also want to provide those sorts of opportunities for students in current cohorts. On the website, you'll see examples of Rockefeller student funding with other honors theses that are taking place in much more recent years. And what I wanted to show here is just an example of some of the funding that we've provided over the years into different policy areas, into different academic departments. So anthropology and psychology, or people majoring in geography and government or geography. You see some examples here. Those dollars that are resulting in student projects also then tend to make it out and even sometimes appear in publications. So here's an example of Katie Clayton, the lead author on an article in Political Behavior about fact-checking and fake news. I think this was from Brendan Nyan's class on experimental methods. So Evan Morgan is another person who received, on that same piece, who received Rockefeller funding as well. So sometimes it plays out with other parts of their academic career, but sometimes it also leads to student publications. The publication theme is continued with people who work at Rockefeller Center. So you see here an example of many different people. Sadna Hall's book on leadership. She's writing another one right now, so it's in a page-proof form, and we're taking a look at that. Herschel Nachlas, one of our faculty members, has just written an article in JAMA, so the Journal of the American Medical Association, talking about what are the lessons from the authorization for the hydroxychloroquine vaccination authorization and approval. Ron Scheiko, as I mentioned earlier, talked about this importance of the Rockefeller Center as a bridging organization. And again, he's got an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education talking about that. I have my own article that you can find online about analogies in the policy arena that help possibly change preferences for healthcare reform. And then also on the healthcare idea, Charlie Whelan, an 88 graduate of Dartmouth, there's a Rocky Watch segment on our website where he was talking in the spring about this book that he wrote even before the COVID outbreak about a hypothetical pandemic. And this is a public policy thriller. It's and I encourage you to kind of read it for the lessons about economics, about how policy is formed and plays out among different constituencies. So with that, there are a few. We've talked about the curricular side, that is the public policy, the courses. We've talked about the leadership side, which is the co-curricular side. But then there's also this big area of public events and outreach that we do. This would be an example of it right now. So in the spring, we had almost over 800 people come through and attend our virtual programming when all the programming had to switch to the online format. One of those in May was Lucy Hornby, who was a columnist for the Financial Times. She had lived in China for many years, so it was our attempt to take somebody who has on-the-ground experience in China and talk about what her impressions were and what the lessons were for China and the US as well. Just in this past summer in July, we had a online virtual 2020 New Hampshire Democratic gubernatorial primary forum. So this has allowed the candidates that were vying for the Democratic nomination to talk about their policy positions, go back and forth a little bit, again, moderated by Charlie Whelan. The upcoming, we've got a lot of events upcoming. I want to focus your attention on one of them on October 7th. So this is, again, the intersection of important public policy issues and then academic research. So we have 3 faculty members coming from around the country to talk about their research as it relates to policing, race, and all of the issues that we've seen play out over the last few months. So Dr. Philip Adaba-Goff is coming. He's from the Center for Policing Equity, which built itself as one of the largest repositories of behavioral police data that's National Science Foundation funded. Dr. Angela Gillespie is coming from Emory University. She runs the James Weldon Institute for Race and Difference. And then finally, Frank Baumgartner, one of the co-authors on a book with Derek Epp, one of our former postdocs, they've analyzed 20 million traffic stops, and then they're going to tell us about the lessons for policing and race as well. We just co-sponsored another panel on students' impressions of their own protest experiences for the BLM movement just yesterday with the government department. So we've got a lot more programming, again, that's reacting to events in the world. One of the other things I heard just in the first few months of my directorship is that this desire for more input and transparency in the process by which we schedule these talks. And so one of the first things we did is add a part of the website that offers an opportunity for people to give feedback to the Rockefeller Center, to me, to other staffers. So this is a permanent part of the Rockefeller website. So I encourage you to use it if you want to communicate messages or advice or whatnot. So rocking the 2020s, after all of that, I have to set the stage for the very dynamic organization that we are. Where does that leave us? Well, 2020 has been a pretty memorable year with everything that's going on, including in the bottom right, a hurricane that's just making landfall in the Gulf Coast. You know, more than 2 feet of water in some areas. So we've got potentially very disastrous situation unfolding there. Already have the wildfires out west in California and other western states. Of course, we're still dealing with the corona pandemic and almost 200,000 fatalities related to that. That, by the way, that Time magazine that you see there, that the very next pages that introduce this topic talk about this being the equivalent of 3 Vietnams, or the entire city of Salt Lake City. So that's what we're talking about to contextualize that information. What a dramatic effect this has been. Of course, we've been through an impeachment earlier in the year, and then the previous Dartmouth classes have experienced usually one of these at a time. 1918 flu, or racial strife in the 1960s, or an impeachment in the 1970s. But this Dartmouth class and cohort, the 24s and the other students who've been here for a few years, are really taking all of these at the same time. And so this is a truly unique experience. There are students right now who are probably watching this from their dorm rooms. They're quarantined. So this is truly a memorable time, and we're going to do our best to provide opportunities for those students to still get the Dartmouth experience and to learn about public policy and leadership as well. There's so many different ways we could go, and so I've got a lot of different graphs and ideas up here on the screen. These are all things that we're involved with now, trying to increase our connections to the global health policy unit, working with Dickie in that regard, or with the Dartmouth Outing Club. I've had conversations about how to do leadership programming, even as it relates to race, and thinking about some of these diversity and inclusion issues there. We've talked about programming with Tuck or with the Thayer School of Engineering. Again, we were not just concentrating on the social sciences. We really branch out, do a lot of programming that's with both of those. You see in the top left, Jake Tapper. So we're going to be doing an event with the Hop. And he's got a new movie coming out, and that's something that he's a Dartmouth grad, and it's an opportunity for us to connect with him on this movie about Afghanistan and the war there. But also we hope to have him return for election programming in October. Athletic department, faculty engagement, I could say so much more about. We hope to really showcase what we're already doing. I've given you just a small taste of that with the classroom enhancement, but we're partnering with faculty members. I think we need to do more to publicize that. There are other opportunities for us, again, to put students and faculty together on research projects, to start new grant initiatives. The global health will be part of that as well. And I have Irving Energy Institute. We've already done an event with them during the summer on renewable energy with a lot of Dartmouth alums, and so that's something that we want to continue as well. My own work has been focused on policy deliberation, so about Social Security in particular, but one of my colleagues, Professor Betty in the government department, just led a a session on a shared academic experience on cultivating this practice of disagreement. I've had conversations with him about how we really should, try to do more of this as well. This really plays on the New England fabled town hall meeting. You see a picture here of Bernie Sanders in a town hall meeting. So we really have an opportunity working with the Ethics Institute, working with other entities on campus to put together these cross-cutting dialogues to do the policy deliberation, to think about how people can hear different viewpoints, hopefully coming to it with open mind, and then possibly changing their impression, trying to figure out collectively, is there a consensus going forward? So I mentioned the Rockefeller Center is currently closed. So this is what it looks like just outside the door to my right. It's a beautiful building. I'm sure you will hopefully see it if you're involved in the Dartmouth community at some point, either for our programming or in classes. I spent a lot of time here as a student myself, roaming these halls. In this photo on the right, there's a quote and also a poster that I want to focus your attention on, just to kind of cap it off and close it down before we end. So Nelson Rockefeller, there's a quote from him about how it's important that we let people see themselves as participants in one of the most exciting eras in history and to have a sense of purpose in relation to it. So that could not be more true, especially with what I showed you that's taking place in the 2020s. There is as Andrew said, public policy is so important, especially as we go forward. This poster that you see below that quote really, for me, puts all of the Rockefeller Center programming together in sort of a flow chart that lets you talk about anything from the first-year fellows to the policy minors, to opportunities to engage with other people, to do research in the class of 1964 policy shop, or to obtain skills training, public policy internships, or the leadership education programs as well. And hopefully that will lead to an exciting array of accomplishments in a diverse wide range of fields. I've heard from a lot of Dartmouth alumni who've been through the Rockefeller Center and they rave about it, and we want to do more again to connect those people to current Dartmouth undergraduates so we can build this community and think about public policy going forward. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Shouty, our student assistant, for possible questions, and I thank you for your time.
I'm going to just jump in real quick before Shadi gets started. We wanted to, and I'm sorry to Shadi to step on your toes there a little bit. We wanted to run a quick poll just to find out who's here today. And Jason, thank you for that. That was great. It was great to get the historical perspective. But while Shadi's queuing up her questions, I'm just going to launch this 2-question poll. If you would take a moment. And you can select as many options as fit. It's really helpful to us to find out who's here and where you found out about us. Oh, that's great. All right, I'm going to say that everybody who wanted to answer has answered. Thank you so much. And Shadi, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanne. And thank you to everyone who's here today. Thank you to Professor Barabas for speaking. As someone who's been here a while, I found that really thorough and really informative. And I appreciate the photos as someone on campus. So just starting off with some questions and a reminder to everyone here that you can submit questions of your own either through the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll get to those as they come. So the first question we have here is, how has it been assuming all of your new responsibilities at the Rockefeller Center with everything being online?
Unmute. Shadi, thank you. So the question was, how has it been with all the COVID restrictions, many things going online? How has that been? Different, lonely. I showed you the scene just right outside the door here, because I'm in the Rockefeller Center right now. This would normally be buzzing with activity, so that's not a great development. At the same time, I've had the opportunity to speak with Board of Visitors members in New York, in Florida, in California. I've had, we can think about programming, and you'll see that with our election programming. We're going to be inviting scholars in from around the country. So a lot of times we tend to rely on our own faculty members, but in this, we're going to try to take advantage of the situation and bring people in with a more diverse set of views and possibly well beyond the Dartmouth community. So we're trying to make the best of the situation, and especially because of the Zoom technology, it doesn't require, now people don't have to book 2 or 3 days to get to Hanover to talk. Now they can, just basically Zoom in, whatever the proper term for that is, Zoom into the sessions, contribute to a class, come into for our events, and then take advantage of it that way. So in some ways, I suspect, we are going to stick with a lot of this. We are experimenting with synchronous and asynchronous versions of our leadership courses and training as well. So again, this is an opportunity, we're viewing it as an opportunity to experiment, to see what works. And again, to go back to some of those other things I mentioned, assess those, evaluate that, and see if it's yet another way to accomplish our goals.
That's great. So I guess we have an audience question, kind of building off of that more or less. How do you and the Rockefeller Center plan to balance out speakers in order to get perspectives from across the political spectrum for specific issues?
Thank you. So the question was, how do we try to balance all of the different viewpoints and personal experiences that people might have, try to round out our programming. So one of the students that I mentioned earlier, Margaret Hubble, has just helped me analyze Rocky Watch talks. So these very talks going back to 2011, trying to look at nearly 300 of these for these very issues. Are we only serving particular demographics? Are we only inviting men or people of a certain viewpoint? So the data are a challenge to put together, as you might imagine, for something like that, because that spans so many different Rocky staffers and whatnot. So there's a lot of missing data from a social science standpoint. We see some evidence of diversity, but not as much as you might guess, and certainly in categories that are relatively new on the scene as well. So this is an area where we can look at what we have been doing, try to assess whether or not we are getting a diverse group of people together. Again, going back to the Zoom potential, we now have the opportunity, and we're taking advantage of that in the fall. I hope this data series that Margaret has put together is going to, I think, look very different in the fall. Certainly on the demographic side, but hopefully on the ideological side as well. Because we're not a single issue entity. We don't strive to be, left or right. Almost like Nelson Rockefeller, we try to bring in a wide range of different policy options and use that, that's sort of our charge. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So we have another question. Alumni who have had memorable, often life-changing experiences at Rocky have had a lot of love for Rocky. How do you harness that energy?
So the question was, how do we harness the energy and love from people who have been through Rocky? I sense that love and energy. I get now emails and possible Zoom sessions with students all the time, really providing a lot of powerful personal testimonies. I didn't have time to go into it on our website, but you can sort of see what we're talking about here by reading some of the testimonials, people who have been on the trip with Herschel Nachlass through Europe, looking at, European debt crises just before we were about to get into, some very serious economic situations ourselves in the United States. It plays out in so many different ways. And so on the website, there are a number of testimonials, some written, some YouTube related. But how do we harness it? So whenever we can, we've got programs that put current students together with mentors from previous generations, previous classes at Dartmouth. So that's one way of tapping into that and taking advantage of people's willingness to return what they learned or what they those sorts of experiences. We also, again, through the Board of Visitors, try to, we have standing invitations to have a lot of them come in to the classroom and help us inform the programming, or they might, be involved with, in some cases, members of our board. We've got one person on the board who's running for the mayor of New York City. Another person who's been involved with the George Floyd prosecution. So again, these are opportunities for us to kind of connect these generations and get people excited about these public policy issues.
Great. So we have a question from the chat. What is Rocky doing to track the 2020 elections? This is a great question, especially right now.
Yeah. So I didn't mention this. I had in a previous iteration of this a whole slide on the 2020 elections. Couple of things. So the provost has challenged us to try to find opportunities to reinstitute in-person programming, because in any typical year we would have had students come through and view debates or possibly do an election night viewing party, if you will. So we're going to try to layer that back in to the extent we can with campus restrictions, to try to do small batch versions of that, having small groups of students, whatever we can, through Rockefeller Center, possibly even in a tent outside, do some election night watch parties if we can. And if we can extend that to debates, in some cases we will too. We're kind of in a wait and see moment right now with the, we're still in a formal quarantine period. It seems like students are taking this seriously, and so are faculty, and so that's a good thing. Beyond that, we have some programming coming up. I encourage you to look at the website for, we already, I think, have it on the website about a New Hampshire panel of New Hampshire state politics and sort of an election panel roundtable on that. But we also are adding, if not publicly, very soon, some national events on, making use of national reporters and trying to see if we can get people to talk about the election there too. So the answer to the question is we are trying to put that on our website amid everything else that's going on. September, we've had a lot of interest in sort of the racial protest movements, and we try to have a lot of programming that's devoted to that. But at the same time, the other issue that's very important for us is the election. Some Dartmouth faculty members have been trying to turn their sites to like mail-in voting or voter registration, and so that's another opportunity for us to partner with them and put out research projects. I'm sure a lot of students will be involved in this too. So it's going to play out in formal events. It's going to play out in the research side. I know it's playing out in the class side as well. And yeah, so, and again, we look for more suggestions too. Use that tab at the bottom of the Rocky website if you've got other suggestions.
Great, thank you. We have one more question just to wrap up. So Rocky's goal has always been to provide space for the growth of the next generation of public policy leaders. So how have the means to achieving that maybe have changed over the past 10, 20 years, even maybe throughout the Rockefeller Center's life? And I guess, what are your goals, maybe about what do you hope to accomplish at the Rockefeller Center? How does that tie in with that shift, perhaps?
In terms of how we train the next generation of public policy leaders? Yeah, so I mean, you probably got a sense through my talk of just how most of those leadership training and education initiatives did not exist, at least not in the present form, prior to Andrew's arrival in the mid-2000s. So there has been a huge evolution over the last 15 to 20 years, certainly. At the same time, we've seen a lot of people, there's different skill sets required now. Certainly, I asked, one of the first things I asked Sadhna was whether or not Zoom training and the presence and just, how you do presentations now, not in person, but in this really networked fashion, are those part of it? And of course, we were already, there's already modules and training on that as well. So, so we are pivoting with the times to try to make sure our students are showcasing the kind of skills that they have now on the internet via Zoom. I think, now more than ever, if it's not already clear, we're a global community. The Rocky Talk next week by a constitutional law scholar is going to be, are we all in this together? And through our global public health initiatives, I think that's another opportunity for us to kind of think much more broadly, think about collective action, think about public policy problems, and then how people can find the solutions to those. But that's the thing, we don't have any single issue or single class. It's really the collective experience that we're going to get. We are looking, and we experimented a bit this summer with the sophomore summer. So our course, our programming tends to go from first year all the way through the final year, but the sophomore summer is something that had been a downtime. So we put in 4 career development panels with recent Dartmouth College graduates. And again, that was an amazing experience. And that also, in 3 of the 4 of those, the people who had been through Dartmouth and been about 5 to 10 years out, they started talking about skills training that they found important that they weren't necessarily getting at Dartmouth College. So again, there might be opportunities for us to fill in the gaps between the formal coursework and then really what the policy world or the employment world demands.
Well, that was great. And I want to thank, I have several thank yous. First of all, thank you, Professor Barabas and Samwick, for the work you've done and the work you're going to do on behalf of the Rockefeller Center. As a staff member, I really want to say we appreciate all your efforts on our behalf and on the students' behalf. I want to thank my tech co-hosts for helping this event run smoothly. I want to thank everyone who's attending. I hope you will join us in the future. As Professor Barabas mentioned, next week we have 2 exciting events. One is the co-sponsored event with the Hopkins Center featuring Jake Tapper. You can check out the Hopkins Center website for more information on that. And then next Wednesday at 5 again, as Professor Barabas mentioned, we will be hosting our Constitution Day lecture with Linda Greenhouse. She's a Yale scholar and a New York Times columnist. And the title of her talk is, "Aren't We All in This Together? How the Supreme Court is Helping to Pull Us Apart." And it will be hosted by Rocky's own Professor Herschel Nachlas. Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again.